Yeah, so I feel like Jordan Peterson's brand is partially dependent on the fact that these are his thoughts, his prescriptions, his ideas, right?
Hmm.
So I don't think making inferences based on that is wrong. I don't think that's uncharitable, you know?
So, okay. I think we're we're about to go off the deep end here. He's already given us this impression that he doesn't want to hold women back, that he has no reason to hold women back.
It's a bit bad faith, I guess. It could be considered a trap, or like it's a bit incendiary. I think Jordan Peterson is way, way, way too intelligent to be able to think that there's actual more value to women in being property of men in terms of their safety.
I don't think he said that.
Wait, let me...
I think that lots of times people look at somebody who's on the right and they automatically like give them less charitability.
That if a society is patriarchal, that is because men are somehow inherently controlling and evil and hateful of women, and that's why that structure is the way that it is.
He could possibly say that workplaces should be segregated based on sex without it being non-liberal. Welfare is redistribution of wealth. Like you're taking more.
God. No,
I'm just saying
Tom.
it is. I don't know, but maybe African people just happen to evolve differently to where they have lower IQs.
I can't believe I made the mistake of being charitable.
But I thought it was kind of interesting that the whole clip that she shares with Destiny starts off with Peterson saying, before,
Oh, we haven't gotten that far yet.
All right, well, spoiler.
Yeah, go ahead.
Watch out for this. So what we see is the whole thing that Peterson is saying gets completely missed by Destiny, which is odd. I find it interesting. It's actually it's not surprising, but it is odd. I mean, he's an odd guy. But Peterson makes it pretty clear that what he's saying is that before the sexual revolution, let's say, the concept of rape, it was a property crime. So what that meant was that what a rapist does is he's committing a violation against a man's property. So he's trespassing on a man's property. He's violating it. And so the man has recourse with the other man. If you raped my daughter, now I can go after you. Or if you raped my wife, I can go after you, or whatever. Now the concept is different. Now we're trying to advocate for women and protect them. And what's the crime? The crime is that he hurt the woman's feelings, essentially. And that's, at the end of the day, that's the problem with rape now, is that it hurts my feelings when you rape me. To a woman. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating. I'm tuned in. I'm listening, but I'm gonna let you get at it. You were gonna watch that clip, but now I gave you a little primer. I framed it up for you. So listen for it. Watch. Hear what Peterson says, and then watch Destiny. Like, maybe you'll see what I saw, but he like misses it, and then she makes him take another swing at it, and then she's like, "Wait a minute, let's just get the transcript, and then we'll write a couple paragraphs breaking down our points about what it means." And eventually, Destiny, I think, sees that he was wrong, but he still doesn't even acknowledge that Peterson was talking about women as the property of men. He just won't even. He won't even just acknowledge that. Yeah, that's what the guy actually said.
Okay, let me listen 1 second.
Well, here's something else that's worth pondering. You talked about one of the advantages of the sexual revolution was the transformation of the idea that rape was a property crime, let's say, into a crime against the woman herself. And I would say, look, I have plenty of sympathy for that perspective. And I think it's fundamentally true. But I'm going to push back because, this is all very complicated. It isn't obvious to me that offers women enough defense. And so the counter argument might be, if untrammeled sexual access to a young woman is a crime, in order for that to be recognized as a crime properly, it has to be viewed as something that will bring the males on her side to her defense in principle. Now, maybe not, right? Because you could say, well, maybe we could set up a society where merely, quote, transgressing the rights of a woman to say no is sufficient. But it's not obvious to me that that's sufficient. Like, maybe sufficient means not only do you violate the integrity of the woman in a fundamental sense, but you enrage all of her male protectors. And then that's enough of a barrier, because God only knows how much barrier we need. And obviously, well, you just laid out a bunch of problems, especially now that the pill introduced it.
It sounds like right now he's talking about which one would actually be better for the woman and which one would actually keep her safer. A society where we say, we've already built the structures and we can say you should just call the cops if this happens, and that's supposed to deter a man from raping her? Or are we saying, like, or the other option is all of the men that she knows and that all of the men that that love her are going to come to her defense and are going to make this guy's life a living hell? Which one is more of a deterrent from raping this woman? Which one is actually going to be which one's actually going to keep her safe more? So right now he's not even arguing for women being property. He's arguing that that one could keep the woman safer.
And we should stress that. The problem that women have in saying no once they're on the pill is that it's instantly personal. And that means the woman has to deliver a pretty hard blow. And that's especially problematic if she's somewhat potentially interested in the guy, right? How do I say no without hurting his feelings, alienating him, making him into an enemy, looking like a prude? And I mean, when you're 16, you don't know the answer to any of those questions. Like, you're not sophisticated enough to. And I saw this in my clinical practice all the time. You know,
Well, I don't agree with his framing. We don't need women to be property for the men in her life to get enraged when she is raped. Hold on. That's not what I just said. That is very different from what I just said. Okay? Which one keeps her safer? That's what I said. That's what I think he's saying. Which one keeps her safer? Which one is going to be a bigger deterrent from... That's what JBP just said. No, he's saying which one is going to be a bigger deterrent? Which one keeps her safer? I was steelmanning his argument. That's what I was saying. I was rearranging the words to be more concise, to actually make a point. That is what I believe he was saying, is that one keeps her safer in the end. Which one is scarier? We have a society where it's deemed bad and the cops will come after you if she calls the cops, or there's a bunch of men that will come after you if she runs back and tells them. Which one is actually more of a deterrent? Which one keeps her safer? What do you mean, if we have no laws, women will be safer? No. There was a time where it wasn't just about you going to the cops. That was like an option. You could go to the cops and they might do something, especially if like your husband goes to the cops or your dad goes to the cops and tells them. But more so, like, you were afraid of the dad or the husband and the brothers and the cousins and all of these other people, right? Regardless of whether it's just in fear of some vigilante justice or if it's in fear of like them making your life hell, or like we can come up with a million different scenarios as to where like these men who like this woman will cause problems for you. Okay, which one is more of a deterrent? The cops investigating this, where evidence is scant, and you know you have to get a rape kit and you have to do it within a couple of days, and even then the woman's not all that likely to come forward and say anything, and like that, or she has a bunch of men in her life who will make your life a living hell. Like it could, yeah, again, it could be vigilante, it could be anything. We're talking about which one is more of a deterrent. Not which one is a better lifestyle, not which one is a better society. That's not the question. Which one is more of a deterrent? That's what he's talking about.
Lots of women in my clinic.
Okay, pause it. Wait, so what is he saying that you think is disagreeable here? I'm curious.
Like, whichever one is more of a deterrent, we would say that is a safer society for the woman. That's what we're talking about. Which one is a safer society?
Okay. Do you think someone can bolster a point or imply something without saying, I 100% support this point?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So Jordan Peterson didn't say, I think making rape a property crime against men, rape of women, a property crime against men is what I want. He just said, I'm very sympathetic to the point of rape being a crime against the woman, but I'm not sure that that's good enough to protect women. Do
Okay.
you think that's sincere?
Yes. Compared to the alternative that he like views women as property and he's just masquerading as a psychologist. Yeah, I think what he's saying, everything made sense to me. You can tell me there's a part that didn't seem, I guess, coherent there, but
I don't care, to be honest. There are other reasons why I'm against vigilante justice. Oh my goodness. We're not talking about. Never mind. I don't understand this. Yeah, of course. No, everybody's against vigilante justice. We're talking about what keeps a woman safer. When he's not suggesting that you should actually enact vigilante justice or women being property. He's not saying either one of those things. Sonia, can you ask Katee if she'll come on? I don't know her. Katee?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Sorry.
Nice to meet you. I don't know if you know who I am, but we've reviewed a couple of your things on my show a couple of times, so I know you.
Oh, really? I think I've seen you on one panel, and this might sound really mean off the bat. I did not like what you said, but maybe it was out of context.
Really? What panel was that?
I'm trying to remember.
I
I'll
rarely
actually
go on
try
panels, so I think the only one that I was on recently was like a red pill panel about
Oh
incels and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah. The shit show Alexa thing, right?
Yes, it was that
Yes,
thing.
that's what I saw you on, and I if you watched a bit of me, then I think you get the vibe of like my position. So I maybe it was like out of context, or you were steel manning someone, but I just like I guess I felt like you were too like sympathetic, I guess, but it was a long time ago, so maybe I'm being unfair, you know?
That's surprising. I would think that you would agree, like based on the little that I've seen of you. I think like most of the time, I think that you come off like very reasonable, and that there's like I normally feel like there's like differences within like descriptive claims, like how you read things a lot of times is different from how I would read them. But I think that normally, if we agreed on the descriptive claims, we would agree on everything else outside of that. So it's
It's
surprising.
really possible then I just completely like it missed context or something, or you said you don't do panels a lot, but like you get really heated in the debate, and then you might be like, oh, I should have worded that better, that came off wrong, blah blah blah, you know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm interested to hear, because I know I invited you here to talk about something else, but in the
By the way, are you streaming right now?
I am. I'm so sorry. Yes, I am
No,
streaming.
no problem. I'm just trying to find you so I can see it. And
If
Tom,
you go into announcements in my Discord, there should be a
okay,
link.
yeah, because it's like I couldn't find it. I don't know why. I'm kind of dumb. Sorry. By the way, if I am a little bit slow or something like that, that is
Mhm.
because I'm still recovering from a migraine.
Okay.
So, just to let you know, I guess.
Okay. Yeah, if there's anything that I can do to make that easier, let me know.
No problem. So,
Um,
what's up?
well, so yeah, I was gonna ask you. So on that panel, the main thing that I was arguing was that there's like a systemic issue that makes men less likely to be able to find mates, more often, or makes them more lonely, especially the fact that like they're socialized differently, and that they get into like video games and computers at earlier ages, and women are more socialized to like be friendly and to be like to make people happy and to smile at people and to be sexy, and like they understand like how other people react to them a lot better earlier
Mhm.
on, and then they also have like more well-rounded lives because of that, to where like they have more friends and they have like a better support
So
group.
so is the systemic issue that basically the way that we socialize men is now coming back to bite them in the ass, basically?
Yes. Yeah, I think that the way that we socialize men like
Yeah, I
hurts them in
completely
the long run.
agree with how standards for women are changing. I've really taken a liking to this point that I've been hearing people making, that basically now that um now that women don't need men for like resources or protection, they are being, now I understand what people mean about women being pickier. I
Hmm.
guess I don't think they're pickier, but they don't have to settle for someone just because they're starving for food, because they can have a job, right?
Yes.
But then that means that if you're a guy and you were socialized to be tough and strong, that might come off as off-putting to a lot of women these days,
Hmm.
and then you're in a pickle. Um,
Yeah, so I
yeah.
think at the beginning of that panel, I started talking about the fact that women are like rising in status while still looking for men with higher status. And I think that that can come
Oh,
off to
maybe
a
I
lot of
heard that.
people. Yeah, I think that that can come off as though I think women rising in status is the problem. Whereas instead, I think
Yeah.
that women's dating standards will eventually adjust to their status within society, and that it just hasn't yet. And I think that that leaves a lot of men like at the bottom without
Then
partners.
I
But
think that's very possible, because I can see how that would it can be interpreted as very incendiary, because because um this kind of the problem in this space, where if we use rhetoric similar to people that we disagree with, we
mhm,
might be misinterpreted as like dog whistling, or like being a useful idiot to some talking points for like fresh and fit or whatever.
yeah,
um so there's the point of like reclaiming that rhetoric and using it to bring people to a more progressive side, but the issue with that is we might also alienate our own, because they can't tell what we mean.
yeah. I think that like I think most people would consider me more progressive, but
Mm,
I do exactly what you're talking about, because I'm not interested in speaking to progressive people. I want to speak to
okay.
people who differ from me, and who like I want to talk to incels, I want to talk to
Mm,
lonely men, I want to talk to Nazis, I want to talk to like people who
yeah.
were in like bad positions, to where like there's actually something to grow from there.
See, I'm gonna tell you what my issue is then. My issue is obviously not that you want to talk to those people. Like, I think we have to reach out. And I think I want us to be in conversation with them. A lot of the conflict, and maybe this will segue us to me talking to Destiny.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of I'm very pedantic with rhetoric. I
Yeah.
feel like language and how we speak and how we choose to describe the world with our words can really influence consciousness.
Yep.
Um, so because I have that perspective, I can be very strict and demand a certain language from people, not because I want them to be nice or whatever, but just because if the framing is women are looking for status, I feel like that immediately feeds into a lot of misogynistic ideas.
Yeah.
So I personally want language to move as far away from that type of rhetoric, just so we can still discuss obviously women like becoming more established in society, but I don't want my language to feed into ideas that I'm not condoning, right? That's my issue.
100%. I agree with literally everything that you just said. Like one of the things that we do a lot on this channel is study language and the way that people engage. Like I worked in rhetoric for a long time. Like that was my job for a while. And
Mm,
so that's what we get into here, is like how to appeal to different groups. And I think one of the things that like really interests me about this space is I don't think that it's so big to where it has a huge effect on society. And I think that we can be very different where it's not going to get like out into the zeitgeist and cause big problems.
I
And we
agree.
can actually like, we can do things differently from everybody else to where I can
I agree.
talk like an incel and not be an incel, and it won't have like huge dramatic effects outside of this space.
Yeah. And I think especially now that I know you, I can understand that that's what you're doing when I see you speak, right?
Hmm.
But I think you would agree with me that someone like Destiny has a lot more influence, so maybe it's not quite the same metric there.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, okay. Because that is my main critique of him. That I just think, considering his size and influence, I don't see it as viable. Like today, I got into an argument in Chud Logic's chat with someone who basically self-identified as a transphobe, and I invited him to talk on VC.
Mhm.
And we talked. We had a very amicable conversation. After that conversation, we shot the shit. We had a lot of fun. We were laughing. He said some transphobic shit. I said some racist shit, you know, and I did that not because I'm necessarily as jokes, obviously.
Yeah.
But the reason why I allowed that to happen is because I don't think there was someone in my audience who would find that offensive.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I prioritized making that person slightly more amicable to my beliefs while also proving to people listening that this person is not someone that their opinions should be taken seriously for a variety of reasons. But I needed to build that rapport. So I was not concerned with like every time that he said something that I considered like transphobic to just like attack him for it. I, you know, um,
Yep.
so I definitely think there, and I do it, and I think that's why people say I flip flop a lot because they get confused by me changing my rhetoric and my demeanor depending on who I'm talking to. But I just see that as like effective advocacy, you know. So when I talk to someone like Destiny, I'm just very concerned with how he chooses to speak just because his range of influence is so much bigger. So I'm a lot more pedantic with him and I have different demands of how he chooses to frame things versus like someone like you. If you just tell me, yeah, I like to use incel rhetoric to try to make incels like less incelly, you know?
Yep.
Not to say that you're not as big as Destiny, right?
Well, I'm definitely not as big as Destiny, but I don't
Mm.
think like when I said this space, I kind of include people like Destiny and Vosh in that to where like
Really?
I think that I think that they're not um they're not big enough to like affect mainstream talking points. They're not big enough to affect like the actual like political zeitgeist. And I think that it's good for spaces like this to exist where we can have like more academic descriptive conversations just to explore things intellectually without having to worry about the prescriptive or how it affects like the overall conversation around those things.
Okay, so I think that's a valid perspective. I think that maybe like a different time we could like delineate that more because
Sure.
I'm not sure I'm on board with that,
Sure.
but I do think it's like a valid interpretation,
So
right?
originally, just
Hmm.
listening to this, I might
Yeah.
have jumped the gun. So you maybe you tell me. So do you know who Big Tech is?
No, I have no
Okay,
idea.
so there's a groiper named Big Tech. He jumped in here and he was talking to me about this
Okay.
video, and we were having a conversation about it. He actually does believe, just to give you a W here real quick, he actually does believe that Jordan Peterson was saying that they that women would be better off as property, and Big Tech also believes that
Men
women would.
property?
Yes, men's
Okay.
property, that they would be better off as men's property. Like Big Tech believes that as well, and he believes that that's what Jordan Peterson was saying. Um,
Okay, just very quickly though, because I see that you haven't watched a lot of the video and I don't know how
yes.
the video is edited.
Yeah.
So, um, maybe I'll DM this to you so I wouldn't spoil this for your chat. Let me just write you this.
Well, okay, yeah, go ahead. Because that's where I was starting off was that I haven't watched much of this, so I might be jumping the gun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. Then let me just DM you, and then you'll see if you even need me.
Okay. So he would end up agreeing with your interpretation?
No. So the verbal spoiler is that he challenges my interpretation, and then he invites me to, for both of us to break down the text that Jordan Peterson is saying. And I
Uh-huh.
explicitly ask him, are we trying to prove that both of our interpretations are valid, or are we trying to prove that you're wrong? And he said, I'm going to prove that your interpretation, Katee, is invalid.
Right.
And he
That's where
takes
we
that back.
paused. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, so that's what we started off by going over it. Like I think we probably went over his Jordan Peterson, the way he started his statement like 2 or 3 times, where
Mhm.
it seemed like he was saying, and I felt like Destiny explained it in a really odd way, and that's also why I wanted to talk to you, because I felt like the way that he said it was a little bit odd. But Jordan Peterson starts off by saying, I'm um he said, this what the woman said is fundamentally true about women like having trouble with like people taking their rape seriously, and it could go back to like being property and crap like that. But then he says, I'm not sure that this is actually what keeps them safest. And then he
Yes.
goes into an explanation to where there is a possibility of where there's this other scenario where women are property and that could keep them safer.
Yes. And the discussion with Destiny was just, did Jordan Peterson mean property of themselves or property of men? And whether it's fair to interpret from what Jordan Peterson said that he meant property of men. Do you
So
agree that that was what the discussion was about?
so far what I thought it was about, I thought that he agreed that it was about property of men, but that he disagreed that this was prescriptive in any way. Is that incorrect?
No. I feel like that's incorrect. But I feel a little bit bad because you haven't watched all of it, so I don't want to like step on like your toes or anything like that.
Okay, yeah,
Um
because that's only from how far I got in. That seemed to be like his disagreement was that he's saying like that he is talking about them being property of men, but not that they should be property of men. It's just more so that he's like making a statement as to where it's possible women could be safer, but not that he thinks that they ought to be in that scenario anyways.
No, Destiny. So
Ah,
I was actually, I'm going to be very honest with you. I was incredibly worried going into that. When I was seeing where that was going, and
yeah,
I was sure Destiny is just going to make the claim that Jordan Peterson is basically just making an argument for why it's safer, but he's not making any prescriptive claims,
yeah,
which
that would be
is,
my argument.
yeah.
Okay,
So I was going to insult that argument. So do you
okay,
still
yeah,
want me
no,
to
go
insult
ahead,
it?
please do. Yes.
Okay. I think um that is cope in the sense that um I have a certain frustration with the endless charitability that we give when it is so Jordan Peterson specifically, if you break down what he says, if you write down everything that he said,
Hmm.
you will find that Jordan Peterson says very little definitive prescriptive statements. He
Right.
hides behind mountains and mountains and mountains of caveats and maybes and perhaps and oh, it's worth pondering. Oh,
Yes.
maybe we should ask ourselves. And yes, you could always have the stance that as long as he's not coming out and saying that directly, that's not a prescriptive statement. But I think we can recognize that human language, and especially someone as influential as Jordan Peterson. So if Jordan Peterson came out and said, if I said the world is clearly round, and then Jordan Peterson said, "Well, hold on a minute. Are we sure that's true? Like, I'm not saying the world isn't round, but can't we just ponder the possibility that it might be flat?" Yeah, he's not saying the Earth is flat, but we would have like the. What is the point of saying that except for at least inserting doubt? You know.
Yeah. I so I agree, like it's dog whistling, right? It sounds like somebody like saying like, Jews are disproportionately in power, like, or 1350, black people commit crimes at a higher rate without
Exactly.
actually making any sort of prescription afterwards. If you just kind of like leave it at that and just like make a bunch of caveats
Exactly.
around it, it sounds like you're still probably
Yeah.
making a prescription without making the
So
prescription.
so I've made a decision to not bring up the term dog whistling with people because I think it's rhetorically ineffective for me. But if
Yeah,
you
sure.
agree that it's dog whistling, then we can just engage on that level. It's 100% dog whistle. It's what it's for, right? It's
Yeah.
just like black people are more violent. I'm not making prescriptive claims here. I'm just saying black people are more violent.
Right.
And it's like, sure, there's the one person who just brings up that because they're maybe on the spectrum or something. But most people that say black people more violent and then stop talking usually just want you to insert your prescriptions here. And usually those prescriptions are not um good.
Okay, so I agree with you that, like, yes, if somebody's just making like descriptive claims around things like this, a lot of times it's going to be very dog whistly. But I don't know that I would say the same about somebody having an academic conversation, especially somebody who's like a professor. Like, that's kind of what I would expect in a class or something of the sort. And I think
Mhm.
that that's the type of person that we're engaging with Professor or with Jordan Peterson. I think if we said like you were talking about earlier with Destiny, if we said that it was irresponsible, I might agree to some extent, because that's normally one of my biggest criticisms of him, is I don't think he makes it clear what his prescriptions are or if he even has any. But I
Well,
do
that's on purpose, right?
so no, that's where I disagree. I think he's just more so engaging in academia and just being an academic about it and wanting to like actually question things and be
Oh,
it
I see. So
yeah.
you are just like infinitely charitable. Okay, I see how it is.
Well, so this is my issue, is that I
Mhm,
um I've already talked about, like, the type of rhetoric that I use and the way that I talk about
mhm,
these things, and a lot of times I enjoy just being um just questioning things just for the sake of questioning it, just to dig into things, just to get into it. And I try
mhm,
to be very responsible with my language around that sort of stuff and not be dog whistly or sound like I'm trying to dog whistle. But I still
mhm.
get accused of it anyways. And so I say a lot of the times in my
Yeah.
shows, you guys have to come to this show with a level of charitability in order to engage in it. Otherwise, like, we're just going to be on different pages the entire time. I don't want to stop and
Okay,
caveat
so
like every
so
couple
you
minutes.
see yourself, you see kind of like, I guess you have a certain kinship, or like you can conceptualize the Jordan Peterson as just a person like you that likes to have these types of conversations, especially cuz he philosophizes a lot and he's an academic and all that stuff. So you're like saying, I don't mean to say like bad things. I'm just trying to have an intellectual conversation so I can see like there are other people's like me who might be the same.
Yes. Like, do you remember the first time you talked to Destiny? I think it was about the stealthing.
The stealth
Uh,
thing, yeah.
yes. Okay. So a conversation like that, really the main point around it was just to like have a conversation around it, right? There wasn't much else to get to the bottom to, outside of like, maybe women should be better at saying no, but really there wasn't, like, we were overly autistic about that entire conversation throughout this entire community. And that was the entire thing, is we just wanted to like dig into it and have answers about it, without actually like always being prescriptive or whatever, and that was everybody's issue with Destiny and Mind Waves and the ways that they talked about it, is it sounds like they're being prescriptive even though they're not. They're just making a descriptive claim. It just sounds very like victim blamey, but they're
But
not actually
but
doing that.
again,
Yeah.
so there are a few issues here. And if you won't agree with, and again, I'm glad we addressed it before, but like, you know how I told you that I feel like Destiny has an influence sphere in which I hold him more responsible to the way he chooses to speak than like you or me, right? Um, which is that one thing. And you say that's invalid, but I think you wouldn't be able to say that about Jordan Peterson. And you have said
Correct.
the biggest issue that I have with him is that I think he's being irresponsible,
Correct.
right? And that's good. The thing about what you said about the stealth thing is, again, there's a lot of charitability here. Destiny is a big, powerful streamer. My issue was that if we take a girl from Twitter and then we put her what she's been through just because Destiny wants to have an intellectual discussion about the responsibility of women in better asserting their boundaries, how about let's not talk about let's not do that conversation in the context of rape, right? That was always my criticism, that like I'm fine having intellectual conversations. I really am. I'm not. I love that shit. Um, but if you use a certain framing, then I can't engage with that because I think that framing is harmful. You know, I thought it was harmful to women the way that framing around the entire stealthing conversation went. I was completely on board with a lot of things Destiny had to say about women's conduct. But I am not on board with having that conversation off the bat of a woman being raped, you know?
So if I said, I don't know, but maybe African people just happen to evolve differently to where they have lower IQs, and it only takes a small amount of time for them to engage in, like a couple generations, for them to engage in a more, Western society, for them to eventually catch up to white people and engage in a society just like white people. There are a lot of people who think that just asking that question and thinking about it on a public, in a public way, is harmful. Would you say the same thing?
Um, I think so. I think there's a responsible way to have that conversation. But I do think it takes extra care to have that conversation in a responsible way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like a lot of the people, and let me know if I am like being uncharitable to you or anything like that at any point, right? But um, because we're engaging with ideas that are potentially dog whistly or potentially harmful, depending on the potential of that harm, um, I think that if you want to engage in a certain intellectual discussion, it is also your responsibility to take the proper care to make sure you reduce the harm of it, right? And I think a lot of guys who use Destiny's logic of like, why can't we have an intellectual discussion about this? It's like, put in the work, just like lay the foundation. Don't just like flippantly throw that in there if you understand that there could be harm to that.
Well, okay, so sometimes I feel like I've done the legwork ahead of time. So to where I'm not going to make these caveats literally every single time. I've already talked about on my show that, like,
Absolutely.
I believe in systemic racism. I don't think that black people are like inherently biologically dumber than white people. I don't think that they're less than in any way. But then, like, on a
Then let me
panel
ask
or
you to
yeah,
clarify
go
something for me. You said that you wanted to ask that question, right? That you presented to me. So
ahead.
if you don't think there are IQ differences between white and black people, but then we pose a question that starts with the premise that African people have lower IQ. Um, can you just like settle that dissonance for me, I guess?
Yeah, the first statement I didn't say. I would say that they probably, on average, they have a bigger bell curve, right? They have like higher, they have some of the highest IQs ever and some of the lowest IQs ever, and so it has nothing to do with them being black because there's more variety within DNA um, in Africa than there is anywhere else in the world. And so I would say like the average does seem to be lower, but it has nothing to do with them being black and has more to do with like how our brains adjust to engaging within a society.
Wow, that's fascinating. I actually don't know.
We don't have to get into that, but
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
that's
just
fine.
like I think that's a super interesting point that I'd love to engage with intellectually. Like I think that's fascinating.
Yeah,
Um,
I just, if you think that's irresponsible to talk about, I don't know that
no,
you
no,
would
no, no,
want to.
no.
Okay.
I think that the first part is really important, right? So like if you wanted to create a panel and the prompt was just like that, but the first part was like incredibly necessary, right? Cuz like I
Mhm.
need to know why that premise is there. So if we're making like that assumption, right? Um then that's different. Do you get why I was confused?
Yes. And so that's what I'm saying is that, like, for my audience, I know that ahead of time, they know that I've done the legwork, but other people may not know. And so I understand
Yeah.
why they may come to misunderstandings, but it can also be frustrating to have to stop and make those caveats literally every time I want to
Yeah.
engage in a difficult conversation. And I think Jordan Peterson has done the legwork, talking about feminism, talking about the things that he believes in, talking about equality, talking about,
I see.
all of these
Okay.
other things. And so I think lots of times he's already won that charitability ahead of time.
Really? Okay, then I'd love have that discussion with you because I think the legwork that Jordan Peterson has done actually lends so much context to prove that his words should be interpreted in a lot less charitable way than the way he hides behind words, that like I'd argue the exact opposite with the legwork that he did, like with all everything that I've seen of him indicates to me. It was actually, can I tell you something really funny?
Hmm.
um well, it was funny to me. This whole Destiny thing started because I sent him a different clip that was a tangent that Jordan Peterson had inside this like women being property argument about sophisticated and unsophisticated women. Um, and I wanted to make a panel about it, and I did. And I like steelman that, and I was like, okay, I know we don't like using words like sophisticated and unsophisticated, but we clearly know that he just means have the proper tools to do X. Okay, so I was being as charitable as I could. Then by accident I watched an earlier part of the video where Jordan Peterson further explains what he means by unsophisticated, and it was the worst version I could have imagined of what he meant by unsophisticated. And I was like, I can't believe I made the mistake of being charitable. I shouldn't have done that. Like, I should have known better with Jordan Peterson. I shouldn't have steelmanned him like that when he's just going to like outright say later, like everything that I disagree with. So I just thought that was hilarious.
Well, he's a psychologist. I think that like most of the things that he believes is that like everybody is adapting, or their brains are always adapting to the world around them based on past experiences, and everything that they do is going to be based on things that they've done in the past as well. And so I I would assume that your steelman is what it was that he was trying to say there. No?
Um, can you repeat the last part, please? I was reading chat. Your chat is very
Yeah,
mad with me.
I they're a bunch of incels and racists. So I'm just kidding.
I think they just don't. I think they think I'm just a very sensitive SGW trying to manage speech, but hopefully with time they'll get to know me.
Okay, so I'm overall I'm wanting to know what it was that he said, because yeah, your interpretation is Destiny played that clip at the beginning of his video. So at the beginning of this video, we watched that clip where he talked about the unsophisticated women, where they just don't know how to say no and things like that. And I think that because he's a psychologist, your interpretation would obviously be correct, because he believes that everybody's brains are always adapting and changing to the environment, and based on their past experiences, it's going to give us a more likely prediction to their future engagement, or how they're going to engage with things in the future. And so I would assume that, yeah, your Steelman would be like the obvious interpretation of what it was he was saying. So what is it that made you think otherwise?
Because later, when I looked at an earlier part of the panel, he explicitly said that sophisticated women don't want to hand out sex. Sophisticated women hold out. And that is the most attractive things about them. And I was like, okay, dude, there's like a lot of extra baggage in this sophisticated and unsophisticated that I knew. Good on you for hiding it. I was very disappointed, actually. But yeah, that's just how it goes, you know.
I'm sorry, I am not getting what reading you're getting from that would change. Are you saying that that's now like how he defines sophisticated and unsophisticated, is based on how much they put out?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
Are you trying to say that he's defining sophisticated or unsophisticated women based on how much they put out?
I'm saying that if I'm going to Steelman Jordan Peterson and say that sophisticated and unsophisticated is just his way of describing women who do not have the best tools to properly assert themselves. That's one thing. But if Jordan Peterson then imbues the word sophisticated and unsophisticated to also apply like a level of chastity in a woman, then now I can no longer make that Steelman, you know? Because now there are extra elements to what being a sophisticated and unsophisticated woman is that are kind of fucking up the Steelman. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do, but why would the sophisticated woman who's holding out not be using the tools that she was given? Like, is that not a more sophisticated move to do so? Because
no, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that, like, if part of the distinction between when we say sophisticated and unsophisticated, and the only distinction that we're making is has tools and doesn't have tools,
Right.
then okay, cool, I can work with that paradigm. But if that paradigm now says that there's also a distinction, at least another one, between sophisticated and unsophisticated, and that distinction is how much they are willing to put out consensually, then that no longer has anything to do with setting boundaries and like rejecting sexual advances. Now this is basically a moral approval of that sophisticated women do the right thing by not putting out.
Well, so that's what
You
I'm
get what
saying,
I'm
is that
saying?
it sounds like you're saying that he would, there's two interpretations that I'm taking from what you're saying. One, the main one, it sounds like you're saying that he's defining sophisticated woman based on how much they're putting out. Like, he's saying, like, they are
It's
more
part of it.
sophisticated. So, but the way that you worded it the first time sounds like it's the other way around, where he's saying a sophisticated woman has the tools to know that she has value, and therefore she would hold her promiscuity, or like holding her like her ability to have sex as a way of like holding value, like that she would like put off having sex with men because she has more of the tools to know that that's a good way to like leverage men.
Okay. Do you think that's I guess what do you think about that statement?
I think that I would have to actually have like data in order to know whether or not it's true or not. And
Okay.
he's normally like the expert in these areas and seems to be well respected in those areas. And so I normally
What? No, he's not. He's horribly like criticized by other psychologists.
for talking about politics normally. I don't
No,
see.
like his studies do not have good you know what? All right,
Mhm.
I won't delineate this with you. Can I just pull up some resources and send them to you?
Yeah,
Would
sure.
you be open to that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Then I'll try to do that then, because I'm not gonna. I think that's a waste of our time. Basically,
Because I can tell you my interpretation or my like my the reason I came to that conclusion is about like different colleges wanting him to come speak and high like Ivy League colleges and paying him to come give lectures and the like I've heard like tons of other like well-renowned psychologists talking about him saying like he seems to be like a bit of a nut when he talks about politics, but he's like well respected within the it's not even
I
just
see.
psychology, it's a specific field of psychology and I can't remember what it is, but
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. I'll look up some stuff that I might be able to find, and like I'll appreciate if you have sources as well. Um, from what I hear of Jordan Peterson, he seems to really be into CBT. But I'm sure
CBT?
he a lot of his advice have to do with cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was the area that I was about to say is that he's
Yeah. Yeah. CBT is yeah, a lot of his therapeutic rhetoric has a lot to do with CBT principles.
and so do you
Um,
think that CBT is like kooky?
what do you mean by a cookie?
Like it's like it sounds like when the way you're saying CBT, it sounds like you don't like respect it as a field.
Oh, no. So CBT is it's the thing that is most often practiced. It has very quick results for a lot of different issues. It can be extremely effective in an extremely short period of time, and it's one of basically the only types of therapies that insurances fund because it has such effective results, at least short term. In terms of like long-term effects, that I think I'm not as well versed about it. But yeah, CBT, I had a conversation with Erudite about it, and she said something that I really adopted, which is like CBT is a fantastic band-aid. Now, some people would need more like specialized treatment, but
Mhm.
we always like it's a great like first aid thing. Maybe that's a bit of a misinterpretation of what she said. But yeah, CBT will help no matter what your issue is,
Okay.
to some extent.
Yeah.
I just don't think that CBT is the be all end all of therapy. And there are some issues that CBT will not help as much. That's all I'm saying.
Isn't it maybe I'm wrong here. Isn't it like similar to what people call crap. What is it called? Like what like churches use and stuff to like make somebody not gay or not trans anymore.
Oh, conversion therapy?
Yes, is it like I've heard people call CBT conversion therapy for like everything else.
That's a very interesting equation. I think it's a bit of a misinterpretation. I wouldn't feel comfortable saying CBT is. I mean, I'm sure conversion therapy would use some CBT principles,
Mhm.
but literally everything uses CBT principles because all CBT is just like learning how to identify and utilize patterns of thoughts to change behavior. Um, so it's just about like having an internal dialogue that is effective to like affecting your behavior, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's why CBT gets such good results in terms of like alleviating symptoms, because CBT is less interested in, this might sound kind of weird. CBT doesn't care if you're suicidal, it just cares if your behavior is suicidal. You know? Um,
Okay, yeah, I
do,
got you.
I feel like I'd get flack for saying that, but basically, it's about symptom reduction. So you can be very miserable inside, but as long as you're a functioning member of society, CBT is like, it will get you there, I guess, but it won't fix like your internal trauma.
Okay. Yeah, just the way that you initially brought it up, it sounded like you were saying like he's into CBT, and then you laughed and
Oh,
said, "So yeah."
I
So it
think
sounded like you're saying like this is a reason to not really listen
no,
to
no,
him.
no. So my tone was like that because CBT is extremely common and is very effective. So when people act like Jordan Peterson is this kind of like a genius, where
Mhm.
a lot of his principles and a lot of the stuff in like his self-help advice is literally just the most common, most effective general advice that psychologists would give. It's just
Mhm.
very simple CBT stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think he's a genius for it. Like that, it's
Oh, I agree.
psychology 1-on-1. You know, like you can find hundreds of videos on YouTube that give you the exact same advice.
Yeah. It's like he seems to be, when I talk about it, like it's like behavioral what do you call it? Behavioral psychology, I think, is what like the field that people normally um like recommend him in, or like say that like he knows what he's talking about, is like
Yeah.
being able to like categorize personality traits and give like good recommendations and prescriptions on like types of therapy that are helpful for different types of like personality issues and personality disorders, and that's a lot of the stuff that he talks about as well. And then I think
Yeah,
that a
but
lot of that, yeah, go ahead.
interestingly, CBT um is not effective, or not as nearly effective for personality disorders. Um, you know,
Okay.
for personality disorders, it's usually recommended other types of therapy like DBT and maybe psychodynamic therapy and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, yeah, I see what you're saying. Do you want to recenter us? Where do we want to go?
So I was okay. So if, let's say that he, because I feel like Jordan Peterson in the past has talked a lot about like women's equality. He's talked about the fact that like the feminist movement has been really good for women, that like women having more and more jobs, and he like in working in male dominated fields is a good thing.
Mm,
I feel like him saying a lot of these things give me the inclination that he is not somebody who's like wanting to hold women back, and that he would definitely not be somebody who would be like okay with women being owned, and that he's more like, and he talks about like therapy sessions with
okay.
powerful women and wanting and like helping them get better at competing in male dominated fields, and
Hmm.
like it seems like his prescriptions all lead to women doing better and being on par with men.
Okay, interesting. So when you hear him make statements about like that he has questions whether men and women can work together in the workplace, you think that's an intellectual discussion he's trying to provoke?
Yes.
Okay. And when you hear him make prescriptions that generally the high power women that were his clients were less happy being in those positions for a variety of reasons, that is also an intellectual like argument that he's making.
I would imagine like there. So this is one of the, like, when we talk about like him being irresponsible, like I can agree that he talks about these things in irresponsible ways, especially with how big his platform is, and especially
Mm,
when you think of the type of audience that watches him, for sure. Like I 100% am going to agree that he can be irresponsible in these areas.
mm.
Um
Oh my God, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Okay, I think I know what the issue is. Personally, I'm not a mind reader, so I cannot tell you whether Jordan Peterson hates women or loves women or wants women's equality or doesn't.
mhm.
All my critiques of Jordan Peterson and what he says are relating to what I'm extrapolating to be his prescriptions for society and like the harm that it might cause. Okay? So I'm not like saying this person is a misogynist. I don't care because I can't read his mind,
So it's
right?
just about him being responsible with his language, not that you think this is an actual prescription, but that you think that people can likely read that as his prescription anyways.
Yeah, and also no,
Ah.
I'll go farther than that. It's like I'm not a mind reader, so I can't tell you he's misogynistic. But I will tell you that like there's a certain if a person does things and I feel like advocates for things that push misogynism, for example,
Mhm.
then I'd call them misogynistic, not because I necessarily think they hate women, just because like there's enough, I guess, misogyny and their advocacy that I don't really think there's a fundamental difference there. And I get a lot of people really don't like that, and that's fine. I just think it's interesting that people say that um I'm hypersensitive when they get butthurt about like someone, like if it like if somebody votes for like segregating black people, but they say they're not a racist, and then I call them a racist, and people are like, well, maybe they voted for a racist thing, but you don't know they're a racist. And it's like, okay, dude, that's like, I don't know, sure, but that seems like a very whiny point to make. Do you get
Okay.
what I'm saying?
Yes, I agree. So this is why I brought that up, is because earlier I was talking about the fact that I think I've already done the legwork to have conversations about race and IQ, because I've already like admitted that I believe in systemic racism. I understand whiteness, and like I talk about critical race theory and all of these other things. I feel like I've already done that legwork to where I can have a more nuanced and deeper intellectual conversation about these things. And so I'm giving
Mhm.
examples of where I think Jordan Peterson has already done the legwork to where he can make other statements that might not be politically correct, but that they are, like, he's already given us this impression that he doesn't want to hold women back, that he has no reason to hold women back, and that if anything, he wants them to succeed. All of his prescriptions are that he wants women to do well in male dominated areas, and for them to work in those spaces. And he even does like therapy sessions with women to help them in these areas. That, like, if he talks about something in that area later that might be a little bit more like sound misogynist, it I think that we can give him the charitability. So where you say, oh, just endless charitability forever, I'm saying I expect that charitability myself, and so I would give it to others as well if they've already done the legwork.
I see. Um, okay, I think that's an interesting point, and it's a lot better than a lot of other Jordan Peterson defenses. I'm just gonna ask you this, and I'll see how you feel about this. Um, do you think it's possible, or like, so I think that someone can do certain things that are okay. I think there's a balance. And I think Jordan Peterson specifically talks a lot about his internal world, his internal motivations, his belief system, and stuff like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I am comfortable taking a lot of the things that he says and saying, so this sounds like Jordan Peterson, especially because his brand is about like, this is what I think as a free thinker. It's not like, oh, I'm just here like opening intellectual panels. You know? Do you think that's a fair interpretation?
I'm sorry, what was? Maybe I missed it.
Yeah, so I feel like Jordan Peterson's brand is partially dependent on the fact that these are his thoughts, his prescriptions, his ideas, his, and I'm not saying he can't like ask questions, right? But I'm saying like Jordan Peterson does not manage like a panel or a debate company where he runs intellectual ideas through like a panel machine. He goes on interviews and he gives interviews and he writes articles about stuff that it's his
Yes.
ideas.
Okay, yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So if that is the case, I don't think it's uncharitable of me to read those things and understand certain context about how this person thinks. For example, I'm sure you'll have like the exact opposite opinion, but you know that meme about like that picture from Jordan Peterson book where it's all like scrambly and there's a dragon and there's chaos and order and like there's all those
Yes.
arrows and shit. Yeah. So for me, I think it is incredibly interesting that someone would choose to represent chaos as feminine energy and order as masculine energy. And I've heard him make the arguments for it. And since he explicitly says he doesn't think the patriarchy is necessarily a bad system, he points out that it's flawed, but he's not against the patriarchy, but by no means, right? Then I don't think it's unreasonable to say that the part of those descriptions is a patriarchal view. You know? Like if you believe in the patriarchy, it makes sense that order is masculine and chaos is feminine. If you think those are opposites.
Yeah, sure. Okay, yes.
Yeah. So if now that I have this information, I have a certain map to the way that you think, at least about this, it wouldn't be completely unreasonable of me to assume that you have certain ideas about femininity and that they comply under certain patriarchal ideas. So I don't think it's uncharitable of me to then make certain inferences based on that, you know?
Yes.
And this is basically my argument that Jordan Peterson explains enough of his ideas and biases and the way that he compiles his ideas for me to say, okay, if you can describe femininity as chaos, and femininity as in contrast to masculinity, and that is how you chose to define it, then now when you say something about masculinity, I need to understand that when you talk about, you see femininity and masculinity as like opposites, as like things that complete each other, right? So I don't think making inferences based on that is wrong. I don't think that's uncharitable, you know?
So, okay. I think we're about to go off the deep end here. So
I was actually gonna say that maybe we should do like an actual like Jordan Peterson like full on conversation where we both like come with receipts and shit and just like go like a deep dive on it and we just make it a spectacle and we post it everywhere and then we
maybe
have people vote or whatever, just make it super drama baity, you know? And like Jordan Peterson, good or bad, masculine or feminine, you know? Like
yes. Okay. So my thing here is that I don't know if even I would disagree with anything that you just said about Jordan Peterson. And the entire time I was waiting for you to get to the problem until you stopped talking and I realized all of the things that you were saying were the problem and you're saying that I should read these as bad.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I hear
That's
these
so
things
funny.
when I hear like men and women are opposites of each other, like I would agree with this. Like one of the things that I study more than anything else is gender, um and I like talk a lot about like the differences among gender, and then like when we look at biological differences, it makes sense that there are these like underlying biological things that, oh
Mm.
my goodness, I got something in my eye, it's driving me nuts.
Oh my god.
That leads to like us interacting differently within society based on our social constructs. Like it'll end up coming out in different ways. And so even like one of the books that I read is called The Female Brain, where it talks about like women having less ability to think rationally because of estrogen, but that like there are so many other things that gives them that actually like brings our society, or makes our society like more well-rounded, where they have more well-rounded relationships, they care more about like birthdays and anniversaries and all of these other things that really like matter a lot within our society, and give us like more what do you call it, like more of a social ability with one another that we wouldn't have without, if it was just men. And like there's lots of ways that we look at like the ways that men communicate and the ways that men interact with one another and the types of friendships that they have, where they're not like these emotional bonds, they're just very like based on some sort of like common interest, like playing video games or basketball or some, fantasy football or something like that. And so women like bring these other things into our lives, and we bring the other things into their lives, that gives us like the ability to have a society and have a more well-rounded sort of social system. And so I
Mm.
like when you bring these things up, I hear these things and I think, like that's based. Like I totally agree with a lot of this.
And I think that's like super indicative, I guess, of that conflict in how people interpret Jordan Peterson, isn't it? Like people who agree with a lot of his propositions um don't see it don't see what the issue is, and people who like fundamentally contest those propositions feel like all of that is just bad faith, because it like starts with a lot of propositions that like they fundamentally reject, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real conflict at the end of the day.
Yeah, maybe.
Um,
Because I even look at like patriarchy and like all other apes except for bonobos being patriarchal, and think
mhm.
like, yeah, there's probably something natural there. Now, with that said, like, I think that we've used liberal beliefs to construct our society, and that these are good values that we need to work towards, that will ultimately make patriarchy almost um, like disappear after a while. But I don't know if that, like, Jordan Peterson says things like, I don't know if that's what actually gives us the most utility. And I agree with that part, that there are some things that we'll lose from that might be good. But overall, like, I think working towards liberalism and equity is like the most important thing. And so losing anything that is good from patriarchy is still like, it's still better to lose those things and work towards
may I
liberalism.
may I ask you why you feel that it's worth losing that utility?
Because I think that that's what women want.
You see. So is it about accommodating women?
To an extent, yeah. Like I think if women didn't really want that, like, you know about like uh, the polling back in the day when we were talking about women getting the voting rights, right? And like
Mhm.
30% of women wanted the right to vote, but it was mostly a majority of men who wanted women to have the right to vote. Like I think a lot of times, like we're listening to what women are saying in our personal lives, and we know like this is what they want, this is who they are, this is like this is what they're capable of. And so if that's what they want and who they want to be and the type of society they want to exist in, then it's like important to actually make that a reality.
So can I ask you something? But it's a bit
bad faith, I guess. It could be considered a trap, or like it's a bit incendiary.
Mhm.
Would you be fine with me trying to set you up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I guess the sort of like thing that I'm trying to test is like, my question is, so if women, for example, said, like, if 90% of women, we polled them and we had like objective polling that literally just like there's an owl and it approaches every woman and it asks her the question and then it relays the information accurately, like, perfect polling, right? And 90% of women in the United States said that they 100% want back property rights, as like that rape will be a violation against property rights of the men in their lives because they think it would increase their safety.
Mhm.
Would you support that?
I love that you're using this. This is an example that I use against. When black people tell me all the time that like you need to listen to black people and what they say, I'm always like, okay, so if 100% of black people tomorrow said they wanted to be put back in chains and go back to slavery, like, is that what I should work towards, or should it be my values that I care about?
Literally my argument, right?
Yes. Okay. So I think that I think it's the fact that we didn't just like think up this thing called liberalism and say let's just do that because liberalism is good. We all want liberalism. We created liberalism because we believe that is what makes us happy and that's what we want to work towards. So it's not one or the other, it is both. My values are like liberalism is what I want to work towards because I believe that is what everybody wants and that's what makes everybody happy. So it is both. But I think if humans weren't going to be happy under liberalism and we didn't get a whole lot of utility out of it, that wouldn't be what I would want to work towards. Right?
I see. Just a second. I need to sneeze. Sorry. Okay. So liberalism, good. So what does that mean in terms of, okay. So I guess the reason why I said it was a trap is because for me it's very simple. Sure, my opinions about what is the right thing to do is informed by how people feel.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I have a few guiding principles that I
Mhm.
think will maximize well, I don't care about maximizing happiness. I care about reducing suffering.
Okay.
And like I have certain ideas about what is like right things, just like a few axioms about stuff that I fundamentally believe in.
Mhm.
And that is what informs my policy decisions. So, for example, I believe in basic human rights, a few of them especially.
Mhm.
I think I will always advocate for them. So, it does not matter if an oppressed group says, I don't want this right. Like, I'm sorry. I don't really care what you want.
Yeah.
Like, I don't believe in reparations because black people want reparation. That's just a bonus.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I'm just saying that I think that yes, like we want liberalism because we think that's what that's what constructs the best society, and it constructs the best society because that's what everybody who exists in that society wants to live in. So yes, it is not just one or the other, but yes, it's both. Yes.
Okay.
I don't remember how we got off on this though. Oh
Yeah.
yes. Okay, yeah. So I was saying
Mhm.
that like I agree with like Peterson to the extent that like yes, there could be some utility within a patriarchy that, and that's kind of what he was saying in the clip that you guys were going over, is that like there is some utility that's being lost from women not being property. That doesn't mean that I want women to be property, but it does mean that there is this alternative where they could be actually safer if that was the case. And so I think
Which
that
is
like
wrong as well. And me and Destiny go over it as well.
sure,
But yeah.
I don't think that I agree with him, but I understand the logic that he's using, and I think it makes sense to say that like
Well, I
um
think the difference between you and I
mhm.
is that
you understand the logic. And I think Jordan Peterson is way too either well, there are two interpretations. I think Jordan Peterson is way, way, way too intelligent to be able to think that there's actual more value to women in being property of men
But
in terms of their
I don't
safety.
think he
Wait,
said
wait,
that,
wait. Let
though.
me
Okay.
wait. But I think that Jordan Peterson has certain conservative and religious values that inform his not prescriptions but ideas that he tentatively puts out as things to think about.
Mhm.
So I think that do you get where I'm going with this?
I do, but I'm like, I was fairly far right just like 4 or 5 years ago. And I I I think that lots of times people look at somebody who's on the right and they automatically like give them less charitability than they would somebody else. And I look at him and think like he's just like me. Like he does stuff just like me. He just has very like more he has more conservative values than I do. But the way that he engages with topics are very similar to the way that I engage with them, and the way that he talks about them are very similar to the way that I talk about them. 90% of the time, if I'm reviewing a Jordan Peterson video, it's me like dunking on him and making fun of him and talking about how stupid he is. Like this is one of the rare times that I'm like defending him in some way, because yeah, I agree that he's irresponsible with the way that he talks about things, and I think that he could do better. But also I don't add like um I don't add in like the motive or the maliciousness, or that he's like, because I think you have a point to say he's not that naive. He's smart enough to know that he's being irresponsible, at least. Like he should at least know that much. But I also know that
Well,
people.
I don't think
Yeah,
he's irresponsible. I think he's actively pushing for stuff that he wants, right?
okay. Yeah, yeah, I I just don't see that at all. I
I
look at like
understand.
so when I talk about like gender a lot, there are like most of like I think maybe half my mod team is trans, maybe not, I can't remember, but that might have changed recently. But like I feel like, again, like I've done all of the legwork with like trans beliefs and talking about trans people and advocating for trans people. But then when I go to talk about gender differences, there are more radical trans people who believe that we should abolish gender, that get very upset with the things that I say about it, and then start calling me transphobic and saying that I have this like, this conservative agenda and blah blah blah.
Mm.
And so yeah, I think like I'm just making descriptive claims here about the world around me. I'm just saying what I think is true, and I'm not even trying to be prescriptive when I talk about this. I'm just talking about things in the way that I think they really are and trying to explain it. And people see that as a prescription because they think there's like this ulterior motive there. And it's frustrating that I can't ever even get to the real conversation with them, because that's what I'm fighting the entire time, is my
I see.
motives and my like underlying reasoning behind wanting to talk about it in the first place.
Yeah, so just very quickly, because I saw something interesting in chat.
Mhm.
Arachnid, I'm an anti-Zionist, so I don't have a particular love for the Israeli state. So if that answers your question, awesome.
You are Israeli, right?
Yeah, I have an Israeli citizenship, and I was born and raised in Israel.
Nice.
And I'm currently in Israel, actually.
Really?
Yeah. So in regards to what you said, let me just think, because I had it how I wanted to address this.
Do you want me to repeat what I said?
If you don't mind, would that be
Yeah.
okay?
I was talking about trans people being in my audience, and then
Oh
I was
yes,
talking
okay,
about gender.
good. I got it. Okay. So I think that the issue is, and you explicitly said that like you're making descriptive claims. And I agree that gender absolutely do you believe that gender is a social construct?
I believe that it like the categorization is socially constructed. Yes.
Yes. Okay. But you believe it's constructed that way because it has biological principles.
Yeah, I think that we're categorizing like underlying biological things. Yes.
Awesome. So, um I think that since I think that what you just said here, um, do you think that's descriptive?
Yes.
Mm, Can you maybe explain to me what you mean by descriptive then?
Yeah, so I would say prescriptive is saying what ought to be, descriptive is saying what is. So if I just say,
Okay.
like, that rock is hard, I'm not saying it should be hard or it ought to be hard. I'm just saying the rock is hard.
Okay. Um, and so like saying gravity exists is descriptive.
Correct.
Yes, but saying gender is a socially constructed category that is built on fundamental biological like traits is not a descriptive claim. It's a theory that you have.
That would still be descriptive, but yes,
Okay,
it is.
that's what I'm asking basically.
Yes, it's still theoretical in like meaning I don't think that it's all that theoretical. I think that almost all like linguists and biologists and everybody who like talks about these things in like the expert fields agree with the way that I talk about it, but
Really?
but I do think it's like contentious in these spaces. Yes.
Okay. Then I think that would also be an interesting conversation to have. Um because I don't think it's just contentious in this spaces. Basically, there's an underlying form of like evolutionary biology or biological essentialism slash determinism or just like general bits of those types of uh, modes of analysis
Mm-hmm.
which do exist, but they're not be all end all of like theory, and they're definitely not like established in like scientific literature. They're
Mm-hmm.
just one interpretation, right?
Of
And
course.
that's yeah,
I
and
don't
that's
really
why
respect evolutionary biology very much.
see and I like I don't.
No,
um
that's what I was saying is I don't respect
oh,
evolutionary
okay,
biology
okay,
very
thank
much. Yeah,
God.
sorry.
Okay, sorry. I heard that you do, and then I felt so bad saying like that
No,
I
as a
hate
field, no, it's mostly like 90% of it is just like bull crap.
Okay. I felt so bad because like I didn't want to. Okay, good. Um.
What? Don't worry about hurting my feelings. So I'm not worried about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not worried for you. It's more like I like interacting with people in a way that is pleasant. You know.
Okay.
Um. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say was also interesting. For example, earlier you brought up the point of like patriarchy potentially being something that is natural to humans. Um, which is again, I think is very indicative of the type of thinking or the type of like while it might be descriptive, it presupposes wait, let me think about this because I might be wrong. Um Yeah, I think I'm wrong because so I'm fine with people trying to argue that patriarchy might be natural to humans. I guess I just reject that what's natural to humans is what's good. So
Yes.
even discussing that just feels pointless to me, because I feel like the only reason why someone would even discuss that in the first place is to then push a naturalistic standpoint that it is natural, therefore it is good.
I agree.
Um,
Yes, I think
and
that's
I
most of the
think that
time for
falls
sure.
into the and I think that falls into exactly the critique that you're making, right? That people are assuming that you're having this conversation and you're just trying to have a discussion about what's natural for humans, and people are like making this assumption that you then want to push like naturalistic values on everyone and say that like patriarchy is natural, therefore go to the kitchen, woman, when you're
Mhm.
just trying to like make a scientific inquiry about what's natural to humans.
Yeah. I think that we have to have like the descriptive claims set up ahead of us in order to have a prescription that's going to make sense afterwards. And so like I agree with you, yes, patriarchy is not like a should be. Even if it is natural, that doesn't mean that we ought to do it. That's and that's what lots of people say, is that like, oh well, it's natural, therefore we should do it, and that's just ridiculous. But
Mm,
the but like when you first got here, one of the things that I said is I think that you and I agree on the values, but we're likely going to disagree on the descriptive parts, and that's why we're going to come to different conclusions in the end. Is not because we value these things differently, but because we have different like we believe the world is different, or yes, we each look at the world differently and have different descriptive claims about how it is in reality. And so, if each one of us had the same exact, um, all else equal, like everything in front of us was the same, we would come to the same exact conclusions every single time. But because we have different information that says the descriptive is different, we're going to come to different conclusions at the end.
yeah. So I think I understand where you're going with this. Just let me very quickly like formulate the sentence that I want here. I think okay, I think a lot of progressives and people who debate with people like yourself are very scared about descriptives, because they're worried about the prescriptives, because in discourse people do have certain heuristics that they use. So
Mhm.
when you concede a certain descriptive, it's very possible that in that moment you just lost your audience, because people have like a thought terminating cliche that natural is good, so once you admit something is natural, then it is good. Now
Mhm.
I'm not saying that that's correct or good or whatever. I'm just talking about debate rhetoric right now, and why it comes across like people are not willing to even like do scientific inquiry and stuff like
Mhm.
that, right? So I think there's that element, but also I guess so. Let's take patriarchy as a natural element of humanity. Um, do we agree that there's a discussion on that? Do we agree that we don't know?
Yes.
Okay. And basically, you're saying, I just want to discuss this. I want to have an I want to be allowed to have an intellectual conversation in public where I debate whether the patriarchy is a natural state for humans without being accused of being a misogynist.
Yeah, and it's not just that. There's like it seems like a lot of times these conversations devolve into like men are just controlling, men just want to control women, they just want like all of history has been men controlling women. And so lots of times I'll like say like yes, there's a lot of evidence to that, but it seems like overall when we look at societies, they all fell into a patriarchal society one way or the other. And I don't think it was all about them being these maniacal, controlling men who just wanted to like make sure women were their slaves. It was more so that like men and women fell into these roles. And now that we've progressed with technology and medicine and all these other things, it's not necessary anymore. And now we can evolve past it.
Okay, but that's like the prescriptive issue, right? Um, I guess I was just trying to ascertain like the I guess
I
qualm that you have.
Well, I'm saying that is the qualm, is that it's starting off as like a demonization of men, where we're always controlling. Everything's about controlling women and us like being these maniacal controlling people. Whereas I don't
Mm.
think that that's as true. I think it's true in a
So
lot of ways,
even
just not
like
as true.
so so even like a misframing of what a patriarchal structure is, like going off this basic assumption that if a society is patriarchal, that is because men are somehow inherently controlling and evil and hateful of women, and that's why that structure is the way that it is.
Are you asking if that's what I was saying?
No, I'm asking if that's part of your qualm, that like the even when you try to discuss whether is if patriarchy is natural or not, that's even that is imbued with like this extra context of people like projecting a lot of stuff about what patriarchy is and what men are.
No, I'm saying that the reason
Oh,
that I
sorry.
would want to talk about whether or not it's natural is that one is saying
Oh, okay.
we forced women into these roles because we were just bigger and stronger, and so we coerced them and forced them into these subservient roles. And
I
then the other
understand.
one is saying we just fell into these roles, and then there's also a lot of examples of us taking advantage of those roles as well.
I see. I apologize. I might be a bit off, so it's taking me a while. I'm sorry that you have to repeat yourself a
No,
lot.
you're perfectly fine.
Okay, good. So, can I quickly engage with that because I find that to be an interesting statement?
Yep.
Um, I feel like it's a little bit of both. Like, if patriarchy was truly a natural state for humans, the way to create the patriarchy and sustain that social structure would be males using their size and dominance to enforce that structure, right? Um, it's kind of like how systems create individuals that serve the system, right? So
Uh,
instead of saying men are evil and then they created the patriarchy for power, if you can like make a good argument that patriarchy is actually the natural existence, it makes perfect sense that men utilize the tools in their like toolbox, i.e., being bigger and stronger, to enforce that social structure. Like that just tracks, doesn't it?
Kind of. I wouldn't word it this the way that you did. I would word it as the other way around, as though because they fell into these roles, they ended up exploiting those roles and being irresponsible with them and over like
Oh,
playing their hand.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, absolute power corrupts absolutely type stuff.
Yes.
Oh, that's actually a less charitable interpretation than what I was giving. That's
Yeah.
good. See, I can flank you on both sides. Um,
Well, and I feel like that's like a lot of times when we look at people like Fresh and Fit and things like that, I think, or like red pill groups, I think that a lot of times they get right like the underlying thing, but they take it to such extremes to where it's now like exploitation. And so I think that's like very common where we can look at things and say, this might have been natural for humans, but we're getting to a point where it's like we're over exaggerating the differences and causing more and more problems with that. And so I think that's what happened with patriarchy, is that like there were
mm,
differences, but we over exaggerated them too much.
that's fascinating. I really like that. It's a bit like and this just came to my head so it might not be perfectly analogous, but kind of like how we didn't used to have toilets so we would shit on the floor. And then someone would come and they would shit on the floor in like a high-rise building in New York today and would start smearing it on the floor and be just like, "What? This is natural. This is what we've always done." And it's like, no, dude, like a bit of context here. Like we've evolved. There are bathrooms, like you can go do that. Like
Yes.
maybe this is not the thing anymore.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I think that's a valid discussion to have, right? Like, do you think you can't? I guess, okay, relating this to Jordan Peterson,
Hmm.
I think that again, and where we come heads on, is that I think he lays descriptive claims, sometimes descriptive claims that are just flat out scientifically wrong,
Hmm.
in my opinion, i.e., I think I have data to disprove those descriptive claims.
Okay.
Um, and he lays down that data, but my interpretation, or at least I guess I wouldn't call it interpretation, and then I feel like he uses it to push certain prescriptive claims. Now, I'm willing to say he doesn't push, he's completely innocent, but he's irresponsible because those prescriptive claims are pushed on his behalf.
Hmm.
Okay, like if we want to say that he's just an innocent man trying to have intellectual conversations, I can roll with that punch. Like, I don't care, you know. um but yeah, so I guess it just comes to, like, if I want to be charitable, just this element of like the irresponsibleness. um Maybe it's wrong to call you out in front of your audience, but would you be interested in doing like a Jordan Peterson breakdown with me to figure out if he's good or bad type of thing?
Yeah, sure. I'd totally be
Where
down.
we like debate resources together, like in the discussion, and like break them down and shit.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That would be really cool. I'd love to do that.
Well, I mean, my whole point is going to be exactly what I was arguing here, is that I think he's able to make these descriptive claims because he's done the legwork, and so most of what I'm going to come with is the legwork, and I assume everything you're going to come with, I'm going to tell you that it's all descriptive claims.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is true. I guess my counter to that would be would I guess be to put forth counter legwork, and then we can even create like a
Yep.
chart. You know. But
Okay.
I guess you could dismiss everything I say, because if he says like women wear makeup to seduce men,
Hmm.
but then you say, well, he put the legwork in to just be able to say that, um, then you can dismiss anything I'm saying. But I feel like that's a bit unwilling, you
Well,
know?
only
Like,
if I can explain that there's like some sort of utility or value to what it is that he's saying, like that it would make sense, or that it, because outside of that, yeah, if he's only sitting there saying, well, I mean, black people just commit a lot of freaking crimes, and there's no utility to that statement, then of course, like I'm gonna have to lean on the side of, yeah, this is just dog whistly, this is kind of messed up.
mm,
But if there's
I
some
see.
utility to the statement of like why it's being brought up, in, based on the context and the conversation and all of that other stuff, then I
Mhm.
think that we'll be able to
Can
like come to a reasonable conclusion.
Well, can you then maybe, Eve, I'll respond to what you said right in a second, but like, could we maybe then say that like the utility have to be in the pursuit of like liberalism or whatever? Because I believe that when he says certain things, the utility is to push his certain narratives and biases that he believes in, you know? Like, I believe he has certain things that he wants to see in the world. So when he says those things, they are meant to promote those at the end, right? That's what I'm trying to say. So I guess there is utility in that, but I'd argue that that utility is to push his ideas.
um yes, I can agree that yes, that like that it would have to be in pursuit of liberalism in some aspect, yes.
Then I'd love to have that conversation with you. Like, I think it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, I'm totally
Um
down.
so Eve, just like personally, um to make a claim like women wear makeup to seduce men, um is it's not very descriptive, I don't think, because sure, some women wear makeup to seduce men. Um, but other women wear makeup for a variety of reasons. But there was not that caveat. It was an overarching statement about like basically the nature of women wearing makeup, you know? And I can absolutely dispute that. Using women's testimonies, by using certain like cultures that have different ideas around women wearing makeup, you know? So, and he was saying that in the context of talking about like women wearing makeup in the workplace. So I believe there are certain like prescriptive elements being pushed there through saying that. So that is why I brought that up.
So do you mind
Um,
if I steel man that one a bit on how I
Please do. Why
understood
not?
it? Okay, so he actually goes over the details of what each like type of makeup represents to a man and why it turns them on, why men
Yeah,
like
that was
those things.
so cringe.
So he's saying that I think that he would agree with this statement that this
Red
is why
lips
they
and
were
genitalia.
created originally, and that's why they are the way that they are, but they've become social norms to where it's expected of women now. And that, like, if a woman showed up to work without makeup on, we'd be like, what the hell are you, like, go back, go home, get freaking dressed. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're not even, it would be like coming to work naked. So it's almost like an expectation of women now because it's become such a like social norm, but its original like induction into society was for seduction reasons. That's just not its utility or purpose anymore.
I see. That's interesting. Just very quickly, Tom, he said seduce, right? That was
Yeah,
the direct quote.
I do
Yeah,
believe so. I
he said seduce.
even if he didn't say the word seduce, that was definitely like his intention was to say
I
that it's
I
like it's
think
there
he
for
didn't say
romantic
seduce. I
reasons.
think he said to sexually arouse men.
Something like
Was
that. Yeah, it was
yeah.
somewhere in that area where it's about like them being seduced one way or the other, even if that wasn't the exact verbiage.
But Tom, wouldn't you agree that in the context of that conversation, is it fine that I'm calling you Tom? I just realized
Yes,
I'm
I
using it
that
like
is
it's
my
your
name.
real name.
It is my
Okay,
real name.
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Um so yeah, also I love your name, Tomfoolery, very funny. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Um yeah. I felt like in the context of that conversation, since he was talking about men and women in the workplace, and there was basically, I felt an implication that women and men working in the workplace together, considering that men get sexually aroused around women, that was indicated as some sort of an issue. Now, an issue that it's
Mhm.
prescriptive might not be segregate women from the workplace, but it was meant to point out an issue, was it not?
Yes, and I think that even segregating women in the workplace is a likely conclusion to come to from. I think it was meant to say that that is a possibility, and I think he literally says at some point that like we don't even know these are things that we should explore. And so when I say like lots of times just exploring the descriptive is important because even if we don't come to a descriptive or a prescriptive claim in that conversation, down the road we're getting better and better at coming to the right prescription. And so I
I
think
see.
that's what he's doing in a lot of these conversations is just breaking down the descriptive so that we can have the right prescription.
And so you then would say that it is uncharitable of me to see a pattern in his behavior where the descriptives that he's investigating are specifically targeting um uh, women a lot, and and atheism and leftism, and say, well, there seems to be an agenda here where the descriptives you're interested in constantly talking about lead direct to potential prescriptives that fit very well with your own personal leanings. Do
I
you
don't
think
think
that's
that,
unfair?
no, not at all.
Okay. So I think at the end of the day, that would be my main critique, right? Like at the end of the day, if all of my content is just complaining about men, well, that might be completely valid from my perspective. It wouldn't be unreasonable for then people to say that my entire agenda online is critiquing men, right? That's just a descriptive of all of my content, right?
Yeah, I think that he's capable of saying some of those things where his prescription could still be a liberal prescription, where like we're not losing any equality in these scenarios, but we would change the way we think of equality. So like if things did end up segregated, that wouldn't mean that one or the other is lesser or better. It would mean that he's like that we're coming to a we're finding better utility within our liberal framework.
I'm sorry. Could you either repeat that or refine that for me? I think I got kind of lost.
If,
By the way, I'm really sorry that I'm making you repeat stuff. I'm just still like my head is a bit fuzzy, so I'm still working through this.
Seriously, don't worry about it. It is not a problem.
Okay.
I'm saying that I am saying that he could possibly say that workplaces should be segregated based on sex without it being non-liberal, without it taking away any equality from one or the other, or one being better or worse, to where like they could still have these conclusions. It would be liberal, just with more utility.
Okay, then I think if we're going to have that conversation, okay, guys, chat, I was giving an example. I was saying, I'm not saying that he mainly criticizes women. He talks about a lot of things. He has thousands of content. But we're talking about when he explores descriptives, a lot of the descriptives that he chooses to intellectually explore do have certain themes in them.
Yeah, it's about finding a pattern.
Yeah, equality, leftism, communism. What was the other thing? There was women.
Postmodern neo-Marxists.
Oh God, yeah.
You said women, leftism, and atheism.
Atheism, yes. So yes, religion, equality, and leftism are stuff that he often investigates descriptives about. Which I don't think would be unfair to say that there's definitely like a repetition there. Whether it implies maliciousness, I'm not saying that. I'm making a descriptive, guys, not a prescriptive.
There you
go. Yes, addressing what you said. I guess if we're going to do that, we would have to then define what liberalism is, because I do not know how segregating women from the workplace is a very liberal concept, you know? So maybe we're working under different understanding of liberalism.
Yeah, I think that would probably be important. The only issue that I could imagine is that there would be it may not be a liberal concept under our current framework, but that's what I'm saying is that I think we could still use the values of the Enlightenment values and just find more utility within them, even though it's different from the way we've practiced them in the past. So segregation isn't necessarily illiberal. We can look at Jim Crow and say that segregation was illiberal because one group was getting the lesser drinking fountains and going to the lesser schools and living in the lesser neighborhoods, and they were obviously treated as lessers overall. The segregation in and of itself was not illiberal, but the way that the segregation was implemented was illiberal.
That is very interesting.
I don't think we would say separate bathrooms are illiberal because we look at the utility of the separate bathrooms for men and women. I don't think having separate bathrooms for men and women, we would say that this is illiberal because we see the utility in segregating those bathrooms. So as long as we have the
Who's
utility
we?
there,
I don't believe in separate bathrooms.
liberals in general,
yeah.
I'm
No, of course.
generalizing liberals. Yes.
I just got triggers. No, it's all good. By the way, grueling arachnid. Could you send me some links regarding Peterson saying that he supports universal health care and redistribution of wealth towards the poor? Because redistribution of wealth, sorry, towards the poor is one of the things that I could probably find a lot of quotes of Jordan Peterson saying that is actually stupid or bad. So I'm very interested in what you watched that I haven't.
I also feel like I've heard him say those things as well. Yes.
About redistribution of wealth.
Yeah, not just redistribution of wealth, but like helping poor people more, having more programs for them. He comes from Canada, where like a lot of these things are a lot better, and they have a lot more social systems in place that we don't in America. And he's been critical of us like not being on par with Canada when it comes to our social welfare.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, America is so extreme with its neoliberalism economically that, yeah, even Canada and other capitalistic countries have a better social net. So even someone from, even like Jordan Peterson could be like, yeah, you're a bit weird that your healthcare is this bad,
Yeah.
like,
Well,
for sure.
so like, yeah, Evie just said he doesn't support redistribution of wealth. Welfare is redistribution of wealth. Like you're taking more.
God. No,
I'm just saying it is. You're taking more taxes from the rich, and then you are using that to give to people who didn't put as much into the system. You are redistributing
it. My God. That is not what people mean when they say redistribution of wealth.
That's not what socialists mean, but I think that's what most people mean when they talk about it. Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna sit here and make the argument that redistribution of wealth, like that phrase, means social programs?
I would say that social programs fall under redistribution of wealth, yes.
Do you think that's the colloquial understanding of redistribution of wealth?
It depends on what colloquial understanding we're talking about. If we're talking about colloquial Twitch politics, no, I don't think that's it. But I think like in general,
Eve
yes.
saying you're bad faith. And Eve has put up a fight against me. So if Eve's saying that you're bad faith,
okay,
hold
on. Growling, or I think it was Growling who said it, right? Yes, Growling Arachnid. You were the one who said it. Is that what you meant when you said it? He said, I believe in social welfare is different than Marxism. Yeah, is that what you meant when you said it? Or am I being bad faith? Am I completely off here? Because I have no idea. I don't know Arachnid well enough to actually have any idea what they meant.
I'm just confused if chat thought that I was saying that wanting a safety net is like what socialism or Marxism is, or is that referring to you? Because like I think a safety net is like, I mean, you can have safety nets under capitalism.
No. Arachnid said
okay.
He said, believing in social welfare is not different than Marxism. Or sorry, is different than Marxism. And so he was saying that like that social welfare is redistribution of wealth, and that is still different from Marxism.
Sure. I guess I'm just confused by bringing up Marxism because I didn't feel like neither of us brought that up. So I don't know.
Because that's what it sounds like. That's what you're. When you say redistribution of wealth, it sounds like you're talking about Marxism and I'm talking about welfare. Yes. Okay. So that's why he was saying, like, what do you, when you say the colloquial understanding, is that not what you meant by that? Is Marxism?
No, God, no. Redistribution of wealth. Do you mind if I Google this? I want to Google this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Redistribution of income and wealth is the transfer of income and wealth, including physical property, from some individuals to other individuals
through social mechanisms such as taxation, welfare, public services, land reform, monetary policies, confiscation, divorce, or tort law. Okay, interesting. Um, okay, so I see how we got a bit sidetracked here. Because if someone like supports social policies and taxes, you might say, well, that's supporting redistribution of wealth. But if someone doesn't support like welfare or land reform or like what is it called when you reclaim private property to be the state's?
Oh man, I totally forget what it's called, but yes,
It's the thing
like
Americans hate more
yeah,
than
taking
anything. But wait,
farms and stuff. Yeah.
wait. I'll Google it in Hebrew and then I'll have it in Hebrew, in English. Ha'alama.
No, it's not nationalization. She's talking about.
It is nationalizations.
Oh, you're talking about nationalization? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
process of transforming privately owned assets into public assets, by bringing them under public ownership. Yeah,
Okay,
that's why
yeah.
I said Americans are terrified by that because they think that's communism. Okay, yeah. I meant nationalization. So I believe that like redistribution of wealth can be anything from nationalization to I guess I'll agree with you. Social programs count. So if Jordan Peterson advocates for like national health care, that can be considered like sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain fart thing. That could be considered
Redistribution of wealth.
redistribution of wealth. Yeah, but also nationalization can be, right? And you can be
Mhm.
anywhere in between on that spectrum, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's completely fair. I
Yeah,
just
so-
I was ignorant of the fact that like it like that just I would never think that something so basic as social programs would fall under redistribution of wealth because I know that like Jordan Peterson, I've heard him talk about how he doesn't believe just like giving um money to poor people as in like social like economic compensation for poor people. um
Well, so
what's it
this is the
called?
reason that
Like benefits. That he doesn't believe benefits, for example, are helpful to poor people.
He doesn't believe, from what I understand, he doesn't believe benefits alone are helpful to poor people. He doesn't believe that like money fixes things by itself, and that there actually has to be like more programs there to actually like get them working in like community service or other things
Yeah.
to where like jobs
That's
programs,
base.
crap like that. But the reason that I think Arachnid brought that up is because the circles that Jordan Peterson runs in, those types of conservatives, like Daily Wire conservatives, Ben Shapiro type people, they are like against like taxation almost across the board. They're against like, redistribution of wealth across the board and social programs and all these other things. Like they are against a lot of this stuff. And so I think his point is that like compared to them, he's a freaking liberal. Like he's just a liberal dude compared to them. Standing next to them, he seems like a very liberal person, and he's not as conservative as people might think in American contexts.
Yeah, so in American context, okay, so maybe I should be more careful since I am not in my super lefty space right now. So I think Jordan Peterson obviously, like most of the world compared to the United States, is more liberal, right? Economically. Um, like it's less conservative economically, I guess, or less capitalist. I don't know if less capitalist, but like most other countries have some sort of social help that is more extensive than the United States.
Yeah.
Is my point. I don't know how to say it in like economic terms.
Here, it's more of a Democrat type of talking point. And so that, I think that's why he was bringing it up, is that like, yeah, he would lean more towards like Democrats in a lot of areas that rather than Republicans.
Yeah, I agree. He's a classical, like liberal economically, but I do believe that he skews heavily. I should be careful when I say that. I feel like personally, he has a lot of social conservative values,
Mhm.
and I guess you and I would have to delineate whether he actually does advocacy that is liberal regarding those social values, or
Mhm.
is it conservative? And that would be like our contention.
Yep. Okay. I you wanna set up a day to pull all this
Absolutely.
stuff up?
I mean, it's gonna take. I want us to properly like gather resources and go over each other's resources and stuff like that. If you don't mind, like I'm fine with us figuring out the format together, so we can just like DM about it and shit if you want.
Yeah, I'm down.
Yeah. I think it'd be really cool. I, if you if you I think we're roughly done. Are we not?
Yeah, I the only thing that I would add is that
Mhm.
the reasons that I argue for these things and that I think they're important is not just that I don't even want to say that. The reason that I think it's important is because I think a lot of the divides that come between the left and the right are like charitability issues where like I watch TYT or Sam Cedar, and I can have a bunch of issues with the stuff that they say, but the stuff that the right wingers have, what they're saying, is like insanely different, and it's because they're reading what they're saying in such a drastically different way than anybody who's lending them any sort of charitability is reading them. And I think it's the same when I watch Ben
The
Shapiro
other way
or,
around.
yes, Jordan Peterson. And I think that we have a lot of issues pulling people over when they look at what we're saying and they think, wow, this person is so twisted. Like they are living in a different world than what I'm living in. And I think that a lot of it comes down to like levels of charitability that we're willing to apply to people.
So I actually really interesting because I had this discussion today actually with someone else, and I understand, but let me see how you feel about this. I feel like it's very like civility politics, like liberal sentiment about like charitability in terms of obviously charitability is helpful to productive discourse between two or more individuals, like no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that when I quote unquote, first of all, I always believe in like charitability for individual interpersonal communication.
Yeah.
So that's a non-brainer for me. Like that's just a sweeping statement for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my main contention is just that I'm very interested in outcomes and not very interested in intent, because again I don't feel like I can determine intent to a reasonable degree. Like I can only guess. So
Well,
what
I
I'm
agree
looking
with you
at,
though. That's why I
Mhm.
started off with the outcome by saying that we're like I don't think it's civility politics what I'm talking about, because I'm
Okay.
talking about the fact that people watching us who might even like think that we have a point somewhere will still think that we are living in a different world from them when we're listening to someone say something very simple like like
Oh,
menus to
I'm on board with you.
yeah,
Like
okay.
I think I could never like dispute that, considering like I mean, I think streamers understand this very well with like chat culture, how you go and you talk to someone and you look at that someone's chat and you know exactly what's going on in your head
Oh
and
yeah.
what you're trying to say. And then you look at how people are taking what you're saying and you're just like, how is this possible? Are these people like not hearing my words? Like, what is happening right now? Like, I feel
Yes.
like I'm communicating very clearly, but people are projecting so much at you.
Yes.
Like all of their biases and all of their previous conversations, that they won't even like engage with you as a human being.
Yep.
Yeah, like I would never like contest that. Like, I live that daily. Like, I think anyone on Twitch, like, even chatters when they discuss between each other, you know, like, yeah, I agree. Like, I think if you want to have productive conversation, I mean, if you're there to shit post and just like chill and whatever, then fine. But I think if you're aiming to understand another human being, you could not do that if you're unwilling to just fucking let them tell you what they think, you know,
Yes.
without projecting your own shit on it.
Yeah, well, and I think I have like a broad array of people in my community. Like my head mod is a socialist. I have like groypers in my community. I've got like actual like nationalist
Hey, what's a
socialists.
groyper? I'm
A
a bit
groyper is a
dumb.
Nick Fuentes follower.
Yikes. Okay.
Yeah. They're like, I have Republicans, I got Democrats, I got everybody all across the political spectrum. And my theory on this is that I think that like I'm actually able to steelman their beliefs and their arguments in a way that they would agree with, and I'm able to read their
So
thought
they feel
leaders in a
represented.
yes, and they feel
Mm.
not just represented, but they feel like I'm actually engaging with them. They feel like I'm actually talking to them. Not this idea of them, not this characterization of them, but
Not the
actually
stereotype.
them and what they
Mm.
actually believe. And then
Mm.
and then we can have real conversations behind that. So instead of me like talking to you like the crazy feminazi who hates men, I'm
Mm.
talking to you just like somebody who just wants to like talk about facts and has just different descriptive claims from me, but the same values. I think that's most people, is we all have the same values. We just read things differently, or we have different descriptive claims. And so I'm able to have like a wide array of people that I can talk to because I'm actually engaging with what they really believe and not a
Yeah.
characterization of what they
Yeah.
believe.
I guess like this is a bit tangential, but like to talk about my own experiences, I guess because of my personal way of engaging with the world, I see myself as a very empathetic person.
Mhm.
So if I sit on my stream and I shit on conservatives, people would assume that in my head I'm like straw manning them, and that I don't believe, that I don't understand them and stuff like that. And I could probably do a pretty good, very empathetic steelman argument for a lot of those things, right? Like even in the case of what you and I talked about when we talked about like patriarchy being natural, like I gave a more neutral description of like men under patriarchy than you did, you
Right.
know? So I have no doubt that I'm capable of that, but without demonstrating to people that I am capable of that, they just think that my critiques come from a lack of understanding, when my critique comes from, I understand your position, but I still disagree with your prescriptions. But that does not mean that I'm not understanding where you're coming from, you know?
Yeah, I don't mean charitability to the idea. I mean charitability to the person. Like
Yeah.
we add a lot of like maliciousness, and so even when you and I are talking about what Jordan Peterson is saying, your next line down is therefore it's bad. And I'm saying, wait, there's like 10 more lines of like explanation here that actually make sense of this to where it's not bad anymore. It just makes sense in some way. Even if we disagree with it, it's still a very different thing than what it is that we're actually talking about.
I understand, but like two things. First of all, remind me to explain to you why I do feel that it is like civility politics to
Okay.
an extent. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I feel like the argument that you're now making is kind of like, and again, this might not be perfectly analogous, but like in the context of a cannibalistic society, there's complete sense to eating children because they're a
Mm-hmm.
cannibalist society. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not like a moral evil in their society. There's logic to it. There's like prescriptions for it. There's descriptives for it. There's a culture around it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I can anthropologically like examine that society and understand the depth of it and still say, but I don't support cannibalism. So at the end of the day, after all of that investigation, it just like sometimes feel like it's a waste of time to have done that investigation, because I wouldn't support cannibalism even if I understood the entire context.
Sure, but
You
if
know?
you're going to argue against it and you're saying, "Damn, I can't believe they're eating these people because they're devil worshippers," and they're like,
Exactly.
"Wait, we're not
Yes.
eating because we're devil worshippers. We're eating them because
Absolutely.
there's utility to this, and we actually get
I agree with
stronger
you.
from it, and we're getting their DNA, and we're becoming like we're if you're going to make an argument against it, it's about like whether or not you're actually addressing the argument."
No, no, no. I 100% agree with you on that. A lot of the times when I critique in a way that feels unhuman, so I told you I'm from Israel, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I understand in depth the Jewish argument for occupation.
Mhm.
Okay, of course I do. I was born and raised here. Um, it's all I've heard my entire life, right? So I would wholeheartedly reject people telling me that I don't understand the mentality and the feelings. But at the end of the day, I examine all of that and I come down to a lot of the times when I reject like these big overarching like ideas or cultures in the sense of like the cannibalistic culture, for example,
Mhm.
it's because at the end of the day, I don't feel like there's quote unquote, well, mm, you care about utility. I guess I'm not interested. I can see utility, but if utility is coming to serve, if the argument is I'm scared, therefore there's utility in doing this to alleviate my fear, um, my reaction is going to be I don't necessarily think that because you're scared, it is reasonable to do acts to alleviate your fear. Basically, I'm saying pull yourself by your bootstraps and get over it. Like, for example, I don't think you should be able to, the stand your ground laws.
Mhm.
So my understanding is that like if I feel intimidated and someone is in a certain amount of space around me and I'm intimidated by them, I'm allowed to like potentially harm them even though they're not a direct threat to me at that moment, but I feel intimidated, right?
Yeah.
And I would claim that's completely invalid. Now, I'm not saying that it's not that it's invalid that you feel intimidated. You can feel intimidated. I'm claiming that it's invalid for you to think that you can take action based on your feeling. I don't think that your feeling like necessitates that you can take whatever action to alleviate that feeling, you know?
Okay. So say you and I are both against like Israeli um occupation, right?
Occupation. Hmm.
But you are against it because of like the way that they've treated Palestinians and you feel like they're just not going to get along at the end of the day. So like there's just like that we need a different outcome here. This has gone too far now. I
Well,
believe it's bad. Well, hold
I
on,
don't know
it's
if
a
that's why I'm
hypothetical.
against it. Yes, okay.
I believe that it's bad because they're white colonialists and they're just doing what white people do, which is colonizing. Okay?
Oh my god.
Yes. If I am making this argument, you're probably not going to like be okay with that argument while still being on the same side as me at the end of the day. You're not going to be okay with that characterization of Israel and that being the reasoning behind it. Because in the like when we come to prescriptions for this, we're going to have very different prescriptions on how we fix that because our descriptive claims on what the problem is are very different as well. And so I'm saying
Mhm.
when I'm addressing an argument, if I'm not actually addressing the actual thing there, I'm they're they're not going to feel heard at all, and I would end up, even if I'm on your side on like Jordan Peterson being irresponsible and all these other things, I'm still going to end up arguing with you because I think we're coming at it for different reasons and we have different we're going to come to different prescriptions about how to fix this and what's actually wrong here and like and all of that, right? I think that
Mm,
yeah.
that's interesting. I don't actually know we'd have different prescriptions on how to solve Jordan Peterson being irresponsible. Just and just to clarify my positions about Israel. I don't necessarily believe that Israel is a colonizing force. But besides of the whole like Palestinians have it rough, which obviously makes me very sad. I just think that the concept of an ethno-state, whatever it is wrong, and Israel is an ethno-state. So I have an issue with that. Like a moral issue with that.
Okay.
So I don't believe in ethno-states and the preservations of thereof, especially if those ethno-states are actively harming other populations to preserve themselves. Yes. So I get what you're saying, and I agree with you to an extent. I guess let me tell you why I think it's civility politics, and
Okay.
I think it will relate to this.
Okay.
And I've made this argument to someone today, and he was amicable to it. So when I call you a dipshit cuck, that's me insulting you.
Right.
Or when I call you racist or transphobic, and saying you're a bad faith conservative asshole, that's me insulting you. And we would say generally that you shouldn't do that because that's a mischaracterization. On the flip side of it, if you I guess this isn't a good argument against you because you're not making those prescriptive claims. Let me just run this in my head because I don't want to make the wrong argument. By the way, I didn't use this as an excuse to curse at you. I swear to God I have a point. Let me think. Yeah, I guess I feel like there's a certain You know what? I don't want to make this argument with you. I don't feel like it's fair considering how you presented yourself. So I'm not going to. I'm sorry that I wasted your time with that. I don't feel like that's fair. All I'll say then regarding what we were talking about is that I agree that it's important to understand the other person's perspective so you can properly address their arguments. Because if someone is scared that trans people will harm them, it's not the same as someone being disgusted of trans people. You need to address that core to be able to get that person to see your perspective. And making people feel seen and heard is important. I guess I'm just saying that because I'm more interested in outcomes, I'm not it doesn't really matter to me it matters in terms of like getting people on your side, but it doesn't matter to me in terms of the characterization of the person. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes. Yeah, like one way or the other, you're going to be arguing against them and they're bad. And I think that was kind of like what I was trying to encapsulate with the argument about Israel, is that like we're still kind of on the same side and we're still coming to the same conclusion, like, or the same categorization of the same conclusion. But yeah, we're like the utility in it is going to be very, very different if we have different reasons behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess you know Fabian, right?
Fabian Liberty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll never forget this because I think it's so interesting. I was on a panel with Fabian, and actually Destiny was there too. And I was making some ACAB arguments, right?
Mhm.
And Fabian, being a libertarian and pretending that he sometimes sides with some more leftist prescriptions,
Mhm.
he said that the way he tries to talk to people who support the police is saying, if you want to be effective with those people, you need to tell them that the police are oath breakers. And that would get them on your side. And I said that that might get them on my side, but for me to like use that argument that the police are oath breakers, that's kind of me like condoning this idea that like this is something. I'm sorry, this is so convoluted. My brain is all over the place.
You're
But it's kind
condoning
of like,
the oath in the first place.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit like if I tried to convince Nazis that actually, Jewish people are rats, but rats have utility in society, so we shouldn't kill the rats. But I'm still acknowledging that Jews are rats, and maybe I don't want to do that, you know?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of related. I'm sorry that it was so like convoluted. Yeah.
No, that wasn't convoluted. I get you. I don't think it's civility politics, but I get what you're saying.
Absolutely. We will DM about the Jordan Peterson thing. I'd be very interested in that.
Sweet. I'm totally down. I appreciate you jumping in. I just, like, I was just watching the video. Zonia jumped into my chat, and I thought, Zonia probably knows Katee. Zonia, can you ask her if she's going to talk to me? And you jumped right in. That was awesome. I appreciate you coming to talk.
Yeah, I appreciate you being so nice. I'm happy we had a friendly first introduction.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
I'll
we
talk to
will
you later
talk.
then.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, have
Later.
a good night.
You too. Bye.